union organizing and stand-up comedy. What happens when one person decides they're actually the same job?
This week, we're talking with Nato Green, comedian, writer, and union organizer who has spent 30 years helping workers fight for better lives while spending nights doing stand-up. And his new comedy special, The Darkest Hour, about how to end fascism, is out now on YouTube.
What does it actually look like to be a labor organizer? What happens when comedy and class consciousness live in the same body? And because Nato has seen too many contracts as an organizer and comedian, we get a practical tutorial on how to read one that every creative person listening needs to hear.
The creative economy is broken, but some people are still making it work. We're here to find out how.
I'm Anna Marie Cox.
And I'm Open Mike Eagle.
And this is Past Due.
We're here today with Nato Green, a San Francisco-based comedian, writer, and union organizer, the country's only semi-functional hybrid of all three. His new comedy special, The Darkest Hour, about how to end fascism, is out now on YouTube. Nato, how you doing today?
Amazing. Seething with rage, as usual.
Well, that can be very activating and inspire a lot of forward action sometimes.
It's generative. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think there are limits to the degree with rage can motivate us to action. But so we like to come in with a super direct question, leads us directly into the stakes of the show, which is, when's the last time you worried about covering your monthly expenses?
This month. I have twins who are 18, and I just made my first college payment. And so paying for two kids to go to college at the same time, I am suddenly worried about like I'm, I think I can cover it, but I'm like moving money around from different accounts and to process the payments. And I'm just like worried that I did something wrong. And then I'm going to have to go back to eating beans and rice for a few days till the money balances out.
I feel you. We have a pretty good proportion of our guests whose answers are today or this month. It's funny. I feel like, Mike, do we tend to get people who say a few years ago, and then a lot of people who say, this week, this month, today? I feel like it's a real balance. Opposite of bell curve.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's about half people who are like, yeah, this has sort of been figured out a few years ago, and half of people are like, yes, as right before we recorded, I was sweating and crying.
Yeah. Actually, that was what I was doing right before we recorded. Well, I was a little bit late.
You were sweating and crying?
I was looking at some pretty radical, solutions.
Yeah.
It can, I don't know about y'all. Actually, maybe that's a question. If it is a thing that you're thinking about right now, speaking of juggling money around, what's the path that you go down when you're scared, when you're worried?
Obviously I want to acknowledge, this is the whole conversation is coming from a place of privilege that my kids can afford, at least I'm worried about it, but my kids can afford to go to college.
Yeah.
There's no, there wasn't going to be maybe you should try JC kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been, I've hit the panic spot enough in my life and been broke enough, that I sort of know how to, there was several years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we were trying to fix something on our house, and it was one of those things where it was the estimate was totally wrong, and it turned out that we had an old house, and they were like, why hasn't your house blown up already? It turned out that they were open leaking gas lines next to electrical wires in the walls that had old fire damage. It was like crazy. And so there was this huge overrun. And, and so I was like hunting down long lost safe deposit boxes to find, bond certificates from my bar mitzvah. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
To make payments, and things like that. So, I mean, one thing I'll say, I mean, I sort of joke about like as a Jew, it's interesting. Like, I feel like Gentiles are scared of money. And like that so much of the struggles that people have about money are about like all of the metaphors and the feelings and the shame that's tied up with it. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that you're able to like think about it just as a math problem and not as a referendum on your like dignity as a human being, it sort of gives your brain like, or at least for me, like a whole lot more room to maneuver.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we end up getting to a lot is how people manage the squeeze that we all seem to be living in, especially as creators. And I think, that's something that we've encountered a lot in conversation with people when it gets tight, brain gets tight, hard to think of options. And like you said, it's hard to untangle the thought of, economic distress from our value as creators. And so I think what your point is a point of wisdom that ends up coming up in our conversations a lot.
There was one time, a long time ago, several years ago, where I was out of work and I had filed for unemployment. And I had to call the unemployment office and get them on the phone. And these are like state workers who, there was some issue with my claim and that I had to work out. And these are state workers who no one is ever happy to talk to them. And they were just going through a checklist. And for me, it was like an insight into my experience, what I was experiencing of being downwardly mobile, and my sense of middle class entitlement of do you know who I am? I need to tell you my story. And they were like, sir, please just answer the questions, and I got so upset and felt humiliated that I couldn't communicate my specialness or whatever. And then I just had to reckon with oh, I'm just a number, another number on the screen here. Mm.
So it is an unusual combination of things that you are up to, as you said. The world's, the nation's only semi-functioning combination of the three, I think you said, comedian, writer, and union organizer. I mean, personally, I see connection between those things pretty easily. But what is the story about how you became all three?
I mean, honestly, the story is that I wish I didn't have to be all three. Mm. My life would be so much easier. But at some point, I had to make peace with that it wasn't about making it. It was just, in any particular. It was just this is who I am. I've been doing. I'm fast approaching 30 years in the labor movement, and I've worked for a bunch of different unions and played a bunch of different roles in different organizations. Now, as I was telling Mike before we went on, I lead collective bargaining for a large public sector local in Northern California. And 21 years ago, when I was between union gigs and I was about 30, I started going to open mics and I caught the bug. And I'd been a comedy fan and I'd been thinking about comedy, and I was at a point where I was going to give talks at union conferences and obsessing over the jokes in my talk. And I was like, okay, there's something I have to get out of my system. And then I started doing comedy, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel crazy. And so I just, so I spent a long time trying to figure out how to thinking about in terms of making it in comedy and being on the same road as everybody else to success in according to the traditional pathways to success in comedy. But I'm far enough in. Occasionally I also refer to myself as a relatively successful failed comedian. I had a stint of trying to do stand up full time. I wrote on a television show then in New York. Then I came back home, and a lot of it honestly was like that. I saw what my peer group of that I had started in the comedy scene in San Francisco as they were moving up. I saw what the choices that they were making to become successful, and I had kids, and like I realized that the choices that those choices would have like made my kids' lives much more precarious, and I didn't want to do that. So I sort of made peace with like I'm gonna have my income, my primary source of income, be from union work and do comedy around that as much as I can figure out, and not worry about making comedy the livelihood. Like there was one moment where like I made I made more money for a single gig than I'd ever made before, and I was so excited, and then realized it was like 1 week's groceries for my children. I was like, what? There's no, this doesn't scale. So I've been sort of juggling both, and there are things we could talk about of like the similarities. Like when I now I do negotiations, and in negotiations I just tell the workers that I'm working with, hey, I want you to know this. I'm also a comedian, and I'm telling you this because there's 100% chance that the boss is going to bring it up in the room. Like when we're at the bargaining table, the employer always mentions it. So I just like, I want you to hear about it from me before you hear about it from them. And mostly people are cool about it. Occasionally people are, as a negotiator, you have to have a style that works for your personality. And so I make jokes during bargaining. And occasionally people are like, it's not funny. And I'm like, no, this doesn't mean I'm not taking it seriously. So that's how it has come together that I've ended up doing both.
Was there a time when you were, either just starting stand up? Because obviously there's a journey from going to open mics to actually, doing features and traveling and all of that. And meanwhile, it sounds like you're doing union work almost the entire time. Were you ever wanting to keep it a secret because of how you felt that might be treated in the union spaces?
I mean, I didn't like. I wanted to make sure that if like union people would find out, and then they would be like, well, I want to come see you. And I'm like, are you sure about that? I don't need you to come see me. So, but it's been long enough that I've been, like the nature of the kind of comedy that I do is going to appeal to a lot of union people. You know what I mean? So a lot of it for me has been a sort of journey of feeling like a whole person. And not feeling like I'm trying to split myself.
So speaking of it's being a whole person and not trying to split yourself, what is the through line between union organizing and being a comedian and being a writer?
Ultimately, the through line, this is going to sound insane as we sit here in 2026, but the through line is optimism. That like I have had so many experiences of being with people as they've gone through major transformations and done heroic things, and things that were supposed to be impossible become possible. And I think there's a mode of comedy that is sort of, a lot of political comedy is the comedy of anger and indignation and nihilism or whatever. And my comedy is not that. Like my comedy comes from a place, I mean, if anything, it comes from a place of disappointment that we're not doing better. But like, that what I hope comes across is the I mean, there's a principle in union organizing that also I hope comes across in my comedy, that the people closest to the pain have to be closest to the solutions. And so, if you spend your life listening to working people thinking about how they're going to change the world, it informs like how you talk about what's going to be funny on stage.
And I'm curious because before we started, you were saying you're seething with anger, like that's how you were doing. So, and we made some jokes about how that can be generative. But in that answer about optimism, I feel like, do those things live side by side? Is that how you keep your anger generative, by having it live side by side with optimism? It seems like a neat balancing trick.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think that there's such a temptation as you like are sitting there doom scrolling and looking at the news to like become cynical and jaded. And it's like all of us are living through in the millions, a trauma response, and like desensitization of, unspeakable horrors that are being done to people. And I think, to me, like the seething with rage is a reminder that I'm like trying to maintain a daily practice of like keeping my heart open to the suffering and aspirations of people all over the world. And that I don't want to become cynical or normalized or jaded or desensitized to it.
Yeah. I guess anger can be distinct from nihilism or pessimism. Anger can simply be a desire for justice and a recognition that justice hasn't been done. It's not necessarily cynicism.
When I was a kid, my dad used to say that I don't know if this makes sense, that anger is the first approximation of power. That people who don't have power think that power looks like being angry, and so people act angry. And so it's when I feel angry, it's like it's a reminder for me that it's a situation that I feel powerless about. But because I'm an organizer, it's like, all right, well, you know how to change that situation so that you have you know how to build power. So what are you gonna do about it?
On this week's bonus edition of Past Due, Nato tells us what happened to the San Francisco comedy scene when tech money moved in.
And he shares what creative communities actually need in order to survive. And it applies to every city, not just San Francisco.
That's on our Patreon, where your support makes this show possible. Thank you to everyone who subscribes. It makes a difference.
Hear it now at patreon.com/pastdue. This episode is brought to you by Vinted.
Do you have that pile of clothes on a chair or in your bedroom that has been there so long, it is itself furniture? You know, the things you keep saying you'll wear, things you maybe bought for a specific occasion, or things that you can't let go of for reasons. Or maybe you have just, as I have, adopted the pandemic wardrobe as your full-time wardrobe. And that means there's a lot of things that just don't fit into that lifestyle anymore.
Stuff gets cycled out.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have piles of tour merch, very, very relatable for me, or other people's tour merch that you somehow ended up with, hopefully not by stealing it.
Maybe there's a way to turn those old clothes into some extra money, or at least clear up some much needed space.
Vinted is a secondhand marketplace app that makes it genuinely easy to sell the clothes you're not wearing anymore.
There are no seller fees. You list it, it sells. Vinted creates a prepaid shipping label for you, and the money is yours. That's it.
For people in our world, people who are freelancing, cobbling things together, this could bring in a little extra for that thing that you don't wear anymore anyway.
And depending on what you're selling, it could help cover a bag of groceries, a phone bill, a little treat for yourself.
How much you think vintage open mic eagle merch is going for on the market?
Right now, Vinted is also offering free shipping in the U.S. for a limited time.
See what's hiding in your closet. You might be surprised how much you can earn with Vinted. Download the Vinted app for free to start listing with no seller fees.
So you keep everything you earn.
As this conversation's unfolded, I realized that I've had like a somewhat of a misconception, I think, about, well, let me lay it out like this. When you say you're putting your kids through college, right? And that your main modes of income are comedy and union organizing. I'm like, well, how? Right. And so what I think I'm learning is that um, union work can be a lot more sustainable economically, or maybe even lucrative than I think it is. And I think that might be an important lesson, because I think there's a lot of people um, who really value class consciousness that don't think that there's a way that they can make a living doing that. So, um, in as much as you can, I'd love to hear you sort of talk through how possible that is for people to make a living doing union organizing.
Oh, great question. So, like, if you want to spend your life in the labor movement, there's sort of basically two ways to do it. One is as a member, and then the other is as a staff who's directly employed by the union. So, and mostly people think of the first group, right? So, like, and that's how I got in. I organized a union at my job, and then I was a member of the union at my job, um, and uh, and so, if there's a job, like, there's lots of people who become, teachers or nurses or librarians or, what have you, because they're good union jobs, and stable. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that unionization is and remains historically the key pathway of upward mobility for women and people of color. The local government, the public sector, is one of the biggest employers of Black women. And so,
Yeah.
like, if so it's a significant contributor in that direction. The So, you can be, if there's a job that you can enjoy doing, then you're active in the union, and you can be elected to the union board, the executive board of the union, or you can be a shop steward or on the bargaining team. But you can also do what I did, which is go from being a member to being on staff, right? So you're employed by the union and paid by the union, and there's a range. There are some unions that that where they don't pay that much, or let me not say that much, that where at the lower end, what you'll see for union staff positions is, in the $60,000 or $70,000 range. I'm, I'll be transparent. I'm like, almost 30 years into my career, and I'm on this, in this senior leadership of a large local. So at this point in my career, my salary from the union is about 140,000, with the pension. So,
Wow.
And there are other unions, not a lot, but there are some other unions where I can go and get a higher salary, right? Like, the salary for the union tends to be related to what the workers make. So, like, people who work for the nurses union, because my union includes like just a pretty big spread of workers, including, like, it's mostly public sector, but a lot the blue collar workers in public sector. Like, think of like the custodians at the airport, so, but if there's a union like that's all nurses, for example, you can make a fair bit more money. Or a union that's, all like professional engineers. Some of these unions make more, not a ton, like I said, but there are some. So it can be it can be a relatively stable income and livelihood to make a career of it, and a pension, and there's portability. Like, SEIU is a national union, so I can move to another SEIU local in somewhere else in the United States and carry my pension with me, and continue to grow in that way. I used to work for the California Nurses Association, and there's a bunch of different unions that share a pension with them. So I could potentially move back to those unions as well. So the trade-off is that for most union jobs, the work-life balance is harder than a lot of careers. So, like, campaign work necessarily is cyclical, where, like, there are points in negotiations where I'll be in bargaining, I'll bargain for 3 days straight sometimes, or whatever. Like, or, when we go on strike, like, you're working, like, I don't know if you've ever been on strike before, but it can be the most exhausting and the most energizing experience of your life. Like, so, it's incredible. And sometimes it's like the work means, we have to, like, go somewhere to meet with somebody on a Saturday or whatever, or depending on who the workers are, you know, when I was representing nurses, like you got to talk to the night shift, which means you have to go to the hospital at 3 a.m. sometimes, you know, to talk to people. So that's a challenge. And it means you have to be at peace with like a level of continuous conflict, you know, as part of, and contention as part of your career. But it can be a really sustainable, you know, it can be a good life, you know, and you know, I've been doing it for 30 years and I still fucking love it. Like, and that's why like I don't feel ambivalent about, you know, not having sort of been able to support myself fully from comedy, because I have this other thing that I do that like I get to get up every day and help working people think about how to change their lives. Like, what's fucking better than that?
So your new special is called, we'll switch to comedy now that we've like, I actually do want to talk to you more about union organizing, but I am stuck on the comedy part of it.
I have a book that is a comedy book about union organizing coming out next year. So I'll come back and talk about it.
All right. Like I said, you explain sort of what the connection is, and I completely buy it. But since you said that there is optimism involved in union organizing and comedy, I am curious about why your special is called The Darkest Hour. I guess that's, oh, by the way, is that a Churchill reference?
I mean, I think of it as a narrative reference. So, right. You know, we were. I mean, partly
Churchill also referenced it. You're just sharing a reference.
Right. I'm as a good communist, I'm redistributing the reference.
There you go.
So the you know, it's obviously like comedians talk about you know, their new hour. So it's partly like a play on that. And it's also you know, the like the darkest hour before the dawn. I mean, to me, that's the idea, is like the when, you know, this is my first special, but it's my third album. And I, you know, as I've approached the material for each album, like I've wanted to sort of push myself in each hour of comedy, or in terms of my own craft. And I didn't want it to just be like this year's grab bag of jokes. And so I had a particular argument that I wanted to make, that, and I had this, there's the centerpiece of the show is me and a whiteboard, diagramming American politics. And I will disclose to you that the whiteboard bit is also a sort of revisiting a Mort Saul bit from 1967, where he breaks down American politics into the left wing of the left wing, and the center, middle of the road of the left wing, and the right wing of the left wing. And I do a version of that. And so a lot of it is structured around that. But the core idea that was sort of vexing me, that I would like, as I was building this material, that I kept coming back to, was that that when we're faced with fascism, historically and today, the left fights fascists and the center fights the left. Mm-hmm. And like, that's the problem to solve for. And it's not insurmountable, but we have to be clear about what the problem is. And so I wanted to sort of build a comedy hour around elaborating this argument that the people who failed to the people who failed to prevent fascism are not going to be the ones that get us out of it. And that if the horizon of our imagination is a restoration of the fucking Clinton Obama years, we will have failed. So like, what, you know, told in 60 minutes of jokes.
I'm going to jump in with a political observation, or just a slight tangent.
I'm here for
it. Which is, so I sometimes listen to Morning Joe, which is just, it's a kink. I can't, you know, don't shame me about it. And they had an interview with Tim Miller, who's a former Republican, who's head of the bulwark, which I have mixed feelings about. I mean, I'm glad to see woke Bill Kristol, honestly, like a plot twist that I did not see coming. But the question that Joe had for Tim Miller was basically, it was setting Tim Miller to tee up on DSA style left wing candidates coming up in the Democratic Party. And, but what Tim said, which I thought was just really smart actually, was he considers himself a Democrat these days. Functionally, he's voted for Democrats since 2016, and that he finds people he agrees with on the Democratic side, and that most of his arguments with Democrats are procedural and not platform. And that he is himself frustrated by the infighting between the leaders of the party and the insurgent sort of left-wing progressives. And his analysis was, why not just cede Medicare for all, for instance? Why not just like say to the left wing, you're right, we need a completely different approach to healthcare. And just that would kind of defang, if you're really curious, if you're a centrist and you want to like start making arguments where you're not infighting, like with DSA, like then just be like, yes, that's a good idea. We'll do that. We'll do that. That seems, I mean, maybe it's because I would prefer like centrist moderate Dems to cede more than that. But it does seem crazy to me that the center left is spending so much time, so much of their energy, like arguing with the place where there is the most like lively discussion and real organizing in the party. That's crazy.
I mean, I think like there's a through line, which is when this, I mean, I think this is not specific to Chuck Schumer and Gavin Newsom and all those people. Like I think there's it goes back 200 years that when the sort of liberal center is threatened by reaction from the right and left redistribution politics, they either equivocate or tilt towards the right. Like that's the has been the trend and the dynamic. I think the way that I would pose the question that I agree with you. The way that I would pose the question is like, what are the solutions commensurate to the problems that we have? You know what I mean? Like, and I have an open, if we agree that we're facing fascism, and then what do you do about it? And so, and I don't know I genuinely don't know what the right answer is. Like, I'm open to an argument that if you want to not only defeat the fascist MAGA movement, but ensure that it doesn't come back in another 2 to 4 years in a new mutated form. I'm open to a debate about whether the first step should be Medicare for all, or the first step should be like war crimes prosecutions of ICE agents and Trump officials. I don't know, but I feel like if you're not having that conversation about how do we defeat fascism once and for all, then you're actually not meeting the moment. And then if there's a problem of like, well, we're worried that we can't win the Senate with a full-throated anti-fascist platform, that's a political problem that we have to solve. But if we're not trying to solve the problem of beating fascism, then like, what are we fucking doing?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what can I say? I think that I don't even know what it means to be a centrist Democrat anymore, except that it's just in opposition to the left wing. Like, what are their positive policy proposals besides not upsetting this imaginary swing voter that they think exists?
The joke in my special is those people want one thing and one thing only, which is for the West Wing to be a documentary.
Yeah.
And the Blonde Medicine posted a clip of that joke, and the arguments in the comments about the West Wing and the politics of the West Wing have been so intense. But I think that like their function has for long been to police the left. I mean, I think
Mhm.
they'll, well, anyway, we can keep talk about this all day, but
Well, it's actually relevant to the creative economy, I think, because I think being a creative has radicalized me. And being freelance for so long has radicalized me even more than I once was, and I've never been very centric, to be honest.
yeah,
Because because the economic precarity is so present in my life on a day-to-day basis, right?
I think the freelance life of creatives is a subset of the precarity that is spreading through the economy. It's whether it's adjunct professors or Lyft and Uber drivers,
Yep.
or like that model of the shedding of any responsibility of employers to maintain a dignified standard of living. But there is a historic answer to that, which is there's a sort of always there's a one response to that is to fight for more sort of regularized employment models, to fight for a restoration of that. The other response, which is what you're getting to with Medicare for all, is to accept that we're in a new world, and therefore the fight becomes the socialization of benefits that were historically provided at the employer level. So instead of employment-based healthcare, national healthcare. Instead of having negotiating wages with your employer, having rent control, right? Like that. Those are public goods that benefit creators, but also benefit Lyft and Uber drivers.
Part of the response there gets at something that I wanted to ask you about. Earlier, you talked about wanting to be, a whole person, wanting to put all the sides of your life together. And it would seem as if one pathway to that would be to, it would be the emergence of like organizing in stand-up comedy, right? And as a musician, like that's something where I often see the clear benefit of, organizing based on our profession, um, being able to um, flex some power with organizing our labor, basically. When it comes to Spotify, when it comes to record labels or whatever, right? Like part of the reason why they're able to take so much advantage of us is that we don't have an organizing position. But the industry is so historically competitive, it just seems like such a faraway notion. And I'm curious what your experience has been with that sort of labor consciousness inside of, another very individualist pursuit like stand-up comedy, and what your experience has been like there.
I think it's there are still entertainment unions. So I think the first thing is like there are lots of unions that creatives can be in, whether it's building the Writers Guild or the Screen Actors Guild or SAG-AFTRA or and NABIT that represents some radio stations, things like that. So where it is possible to build existing unions, it makes sense to do that. And the I think that I think you're right. Comedians tend to be sort of cutthroat, like you musicians. That there's always, that the key to historically the key to labor organizing is to be able to choke the labor supply. That like right. That's what a strike does. Is you choke the labor supply as a way of exercising leverage, and that the comedy industry doesn't. They don't care about. They certainly don't care about Nato Green, and they're not going to care about Open Mike Eagle if they can get, dumber version of Open Mike Eagle for half as much, right? Like, and they could, or AI Open Mike Eagle. So that I think there's for groups of workers where there is an employer that you can bargain with, it is worth doing so and figuring out a union that will throw down with you. For groups of workers where the collective action can be appropriate even when collective bargaining is not, right? So So creatives can organize around making demands for different kinds of regulation of streaming platforms, for example. Or, as I said, creatives can organize around different kinds of, here in San Francisco, we're in the process of breaking ground on a new $100 million housing development for artists. So like there's, there are demands that we could make that would benefit the creative economy that aren't in the form of negotiating union contracts in the same way that the Teamsters negotiate with UPS.
I'm just fantasizing about what a union for freelance writers would look like, and I'm afraid that it would not look very robust. There is something that calls itself like the Freelancers Union, and I am a member of that, but it's mainly, honestly, to be frank, the only reason I'm a member is that you can get a National Writers Union press card. If you show that you have, you send them clips, and then you can get a photo ID that identifies you as a member of the press, which is one of the most valuable things that I have. But other than that, I think that they offer some guidance on healthcare, but not actual access to any sort of like discounted healthcare or anything like that. And if you look at the rates that we get paid, I think it's as embarrassing as musicians and comedians, especially with the rise of AI, but also just the disappearance of jobs. I kind of feel like at least musicians and comedians, the gigs are out there, like maybe you don't get paid very much, but they exist. And there's just nothing to write for anymore.
Yeah, I mean there's in the club system, in the comedy club system, I've been I was passed as a for the Live Nation clubs as a host in 2008, and now I can headline some nights, and I'm a feature, a middle act. But as long as I've been doing comedy, the sort of going rate was like 50 in comedy clubs. Every comedy club chain that I've performed in, the going rate for a typical show was $50 for the feature, for the host, $100 for the feature, and then the headline would negotiate their own deal. And there were times when I featured for incredible, amazing humans like Maria Bamford, who would say to me, at the end of a weekend, how much is the club paying you? I'm going to double it. Right. But there's no number of $100 spots that is like mathematically possible for me to do to survive. So it's like there has to be a way to jump the scale that is, to scale up. It's like you jump a level by occasionally I'll get to book to do certain kinds of like political benefits or private gigs or whatever that specifically want a political comedian, and those might pay, like tip, $1,000 to $2,000 for one evening, and that starts to feel like something that is more manageable to get paid $1,000 to go on stage and talk for half an hour. But I don't get 300 of those a year. I get 15.
Yeah. Mike, and you've talked about how much you get paid, and is it sort of stayed steady? Like it hasn't increased with the way that everything else has increased, I assume.
No, right? And it's very tied to, how many tickets I sold the last time I was in town. It's very tied to that in a way that, the years spent on the road doing the job have nothing to do with how much I get paid. It's more directly tied to how many people bought a ticket the last time I was there.
It's the creative economy is a weird one because we don't get compensated by how much time we spend on something, right? Like that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't think about when they look at our work. People sometimes are shocked that I get paid per word no matter what. Like, that's just how it goes. No matter if it's an in-depth reported feature or if it's something that I'm able to just toss off. And also, no matter which one is harder to write for me. And also, I mean, I'll say, I've said this before on the podcast, that $1 a word was considered a really respectable rate 25 years ago. And it's still what people pay. Maybe I get paid $2 a word at for a couple of really upscale places, but it's criminal. It's,
I had a twice a month column in one of our local papers for about 4 years, and I got paid $150 per column. And again, that was like a nice supplement to my income. And when I think about the stand-up gigs that I get that pay more, like to what you're saying, it's like if I think about the 30 minutes that I'm on stage, I'm getting paid a lot, but I can't that's not actually how it works. Right. It's like, it's the 5,000 shows I did for free right before that to be able to do those 30 minutes that, and then I like want to be on a rooftop with a rifle.
It's infuriating. And sometimes I forget. Like, I'm so glad we do this show, because sometimes I forget why I do what I do. Because I can get so focused on, see, I'm getting emotional again. It's been emotional a couple of months. But there's a reason, right? Like, of course, this is what we do. Like, something I really identified in what you said, Nato, was actually like feeling whole. Like, that's what this career gives me. And that, I've been lucky enough to do it my whole life. Like, I don't know, Mike, have you pretty much been able to make a living as a musician since you kind of decided you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, I got laid off from my last civilian job in 2009. And, it took a couple of years of being on unemployment trying to figure it out. But yeah, since then, through various means, I've been able to make a living in entertainment, which on paper it's a miracle. You know what I'm saying? Like near 20-year career making the exact music I want to make. That on paper will never have like mass appeal. Like it shouldn't work. And so, that's why gratitude is always an important part of my outlook. 'Cause, I've seen a lot of people try to do it and not be able to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been lucky too. I haven't had a real job in a long time either. And it's easy for me to forget, like, oh, right. Like, we get to do this.
This episode is brought to you by Vinted.
Do you have that pile of clothes on a chair or in your bedroom that has been there so long it is itself furniture? The things you keep saying you'll wear, things you maybe bought for a specific occasion, or things that you can't let go of for reasons. Or maybe you have just, as I have, adopted the pandemic wardrobe as your full-time wardrobe. And that means there's a lot of things that just don't fit into that lifestyle anymore.
Stuff gets cycled out.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have piles of tour merch, very, very relatable for me, or other people's tour merch that you somehow ended up with, hopefully not by stealing it.
Maybe there's a way to turn those old clothes into some extra money, or at least clear up some much needed space.
Vinted is a secondhand marketplace app that makes it genuinely easy to sell the clothes you're not wearing anymore.
There are no seller fees. You list it, it sells. Vinted creates a prepaid shipping label for you, and the money is yours. That's it.
For people in our world, people who are freelancing, cobbling things together, this could bring in a little extra for that thing that you don't wear anymore anyway.
And depending on what you're selling, it could help cover a bag of groceries, a phone bill, a little treat for yourself.
How much you think vintage open mic eagle merch is going for? on the market.
Right now, Vinted is also offering free shipping in the US for a limited time.
See what's hiding in your closet. You might be surprised how much you can earn with Vinted. Download the Vinted app for free to start listing with no seller fees.
So you keep everything you earn.
It occurs to me, I don't know if it fits, but given the nature of the show, given and who I am, I have some actual practical tips for creatives when negotiating contracts.
Oh, wow.
That might be useful for your listeners.
Oh, yeah. This shouldn't be a bonus. This should actually be this.
It sounds great.
Like a little treat for people who made it to the end of the episode. Please tell us.
So for me as a, I'm as a union organizer, union negotiator who negotiates contracts, as a creative person, I get contracts and I renegotiate. I don't have anyone else negotiate for me. I renegotiate every contract that I get. So I have a couple of very simple practical tips for creatives when you're negotiating contracts on your own behalf. What people tend to focus on is the money, but I have a book coming out next year. My publisher is Haymarket. They sent me a contract. It's a good contract. It's a great righteous left-wing publisher. But I said to them, I'm going to ask you questions about the contract that no one's ever asked before because this is what I do. So a couple things to think about when you get a contract. When you are getting a contract, you should read the contract and you should make sure that you understand it, right? And that you, at the beginning, when you're entering into a contract, you're excited to be going into business with someone and excited to be working with someone. And so then you're not trying to anticipate all the things that could go wrong. And what has happened to me most of the time when I've negotiated a contract is that I'll have a conversation with someone that we want to work together, whether it's a record label or a production company or whatever. And then they have some business office send me over a boilerplate contract that does not reflect the actual conversation that I've been having with the person that I'm working with.
Very real.
So what I say is we need to, so it's not even about the monetary terms. I just say this doesn't, the thing that you and I talked about, we need to write that down. And if there's a bunch of other shit in here that isn't what we talked about, let's take it out. The most important provisions of a contract are how you get out of it and how it's enforced. And so in all of my contracts, what it says is is that you have the right to distribute my work as long as you continue to distribute it. And if you stop distributing it, the rights revert to me. So that I never want to be in the situation where, as some artists that I know, some label produce their album and now they can't get it and they can't reissue it and it's not in circulation anymore, right? So or there's some new distribution platform and my label isn't on it and then I can't distribute my shit anymore on the hot new thing. So I want to make sure that the rights revert to me, that it's enforceable in a way that doesn't require me to spend $100,000 on lawyers, that all the terms in the contract are defined. So like in my book contract, it would say pursuant to the regular rate. And I was like, okay, well, what's the regular rate? And where's the definition of this term in the contract? So that, there are some places, might be some places in the contract where it'll say, it'll reference something else that's outside of the contract. And I'll say, okay, well, what's that fee, based on the usual fees? Okay, show me the fee schedule. So I want to make sure that I can track all of the definitions within the contract. And that I know how it's going to be enforced. So typically in entertainment, a lot of contracts are enforced through arbitration, which can be okay, but it means that you have to be able to anticipate that. And that how do you get out of it? Who has the right to terminate it? Who has the right? How much notice is required? Can it be terminated for any reason? How's the money divided at the end of the contract? It can be difficult and unappealing. Like when you're excited to go into business with somebody, to then think about how is this relationship going to fall apart. But having that conversation when you still like each other before you're fighting and trying to figure out how to untangle your business is so much easier. So that's why, in legal terms, in law school, when they teach contract law, a contract is what they call the meeting of the minds. It is what's enforceable is what the parties understood that they agreed to. And so, what you want to make sure is that what's written on the page reflects your understanding of what you've agreed to. So those are just a couple of like key concepts that I keep coming back to again and again. So I don't when I get a contract, I'm usually not that worried about the money. I sort of know going in what the money's going to be. It's really about the rights and like what are the other rights? What else do they have ownership of? What else do they get a stake in? What else do I get a stake in? How do I get the rights back? How is it enforceable? What happens if there's a dispute? When does it end? All that. Those are the questions that I end up wanting to focus on.
That's so real. As somebody who's seen a lot of contracts and had a lot of different types of contracts with different entities, that is very, very valuable perspective. So we thank you for that. And I think a lot of our listeners will be greatly helped by it. And like Anna was saying, one of the most important parts of our show is turning our platform over to you, the guests, to let people know how they can help you. So if there's something you want to plug, Nato, now is the time.
Thank you so much. My new stand-up special, The Darkest Hour, is out as a full-length special on YouTube. The album is out now everywhere. Although, if you want to support me, the best way to do it is on Bandcamp.
Yes,
that's
indeed.
the most, and actually, the best way to do it is to wait for Bandcamp Friday when Bandcamp waives their fees, and then buy it, because that's when we get the most money out of it. You can follow me at Mr. Nato Green on Instagram or Nato Green on Blue Sky.
Glad to hear you're not on Twitter or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Makes me happy. Thank you so much. This was educational in a way that I think in a practical way.
Absolutely.
Not every interview is, although we always learn a lot from every guest, obviously. But we don't often get pro tips on dealing with contracts. So really appreciate that.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Anna, what's going on in your world that we should let people know about or remind them of?
Wow. Well, let's see. My big piece on female presidents, or the absence of them, I should say, in American history is out now for the New Republic. And I have a Patreon, and that is Anna Marie Cox 2, patreon.com/Anna Marie Cox 2, where I recently released a video about David Brooks, the now Atlantic columnist, that is about the worst and best column that David Brooks has ever done. And I also am continuing with my sci-fi podcast, Space the Nation, which has a Patreon at patreon.com/Space the Nation. And I'm doing a lot of freelance editing. If anyone is curious, you can get in touch with me via my website, which is AnnaMarieCox.com. I think I've already said here, I've edited a wide and bewildering variety of things as a freelance editor, from comic books to law review articles to sci-fi novels. It's I like it.
Nice.
It's interesting.
What are the chances that David Brooks reads or sees your video about the best and worst David Brooks column?
You know, he's one of those people that I bet he monitors,
right,
like critical things about him. Like, I bet he has an alert for his name on Twitter, and maybe he might be like a Blue Sky lurker or something. He seems like that kind of guy, you know?
I can see.
He would like, he just hate reads people who are critical of him.
He uses it as fuel.
Yeah. What about you, Mike? Mike, you have a new album out.
I did.
I know that.
I just put a new album out.
It's called Doomed.
And I'm so glad you said it that way, because that's the appropriate way to say it. It is out now. It's been out a little over a week. It's never too late if anyone hasn't heard it yet to jump in and listen. It's on all streaming services, but we appreciate it most if you support it on platforms like Bandcamp, where you can buy it digitally, on vinyl, or on compact disc. And I announced some new tour dates that are over at mikeeagle.net for shows that are happening in October and November.
And it is being so well received.
I concur.
I feel like people need to know that there are critics out there who were absolutely raving
I wonder what
about this album. And your last album got a bunch of raves.
It did.
So
it did. And these are two very different albums. So it's cool that they both got positive reception. But now I can only help but wonder what David Brooks would think about it if he heard it. I can't help but wonder.
Mike, I hate to tell this to you. But I don't really wonder.
Okay.
I have a pretty good idea.
Well, it's only right now. I never wondered before this moment. It's just the flow of the conversation.
You just
I got David Brooks in my mind.
I don't think he would, although he has written about romantic love.
Oh, that sounds
in the past,
scary. That sounds real scary.
I think I've not enjoyed those articles.
I bet.
I think he would, let's just say, not get it.
I can dig that. Then there's plenty of people that don't.
All right. Talk to you later, Mike.
I can't wait.
Past Due is hosted by Anna Marie Cox and Open Mike Eagle. It's produced by Andrew Stephen. You can find more at pastduepodcast.com. Help support the show by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/pastdue. You'll get bonus content, extended interviews, and more. As always, if you like what we're doing, another way to help is by subscribing, sharing the show, and leaving us a review. Thanks for listening.
What if doctors could detect Alzheimer's before symptoms appear or treat cancer with unprecedented precision? On the new season of Tomorrow's Cure, the chart-topping and 2025 Ambie Award finalist podcast from Mayo Clinic, we explore how breakthroughs like these are already reshaping the future of healthcare. I'm Lindsay Sievert, the new host of Tomorrow's Cure, and this season I'm joined by leading physicians, researchers, and Mayo Clinic experts exploring everything from AI-powered diagnostics to precision cancer treatments. Follow Tomorrow's Cure wherever you get your podcasts.